The chandelier cast a cold, indifferent light over the polished dining table, its brilliance dimmed by the tension hanging in the room. Emily sat, her hands folded neatly, but her mind a storm of doubt and yearning. Across from her, William's measured smile was as hollow as the promises she feared his life could offer. "You must understand," Eleanor's voice broke the silence, clipped yet commanding. "This isn't about love, Emily. It's about survival. Legacy." Emily nodded, not out of agreement, but a quiet resignation that left a bitter taste in her mouth. What did legacy mean to a woman who dreamed of pastries dusted with powdered sugar, not fortunes gilded with compromise? Outside this gilded prison, the streets of New York hummed with an urgency she envied, a world of realness and grit, where names meant nothing and actions everything. It was in those streets she first saw him, Ethan. A man with hands stained in paint and a gaze that pierced her carefully constructed walls. "You're wasting it," he had told her when she spilled her coffee in her hurry to leave the shelter. She remembered laughing, the sound foreign, almost forgotten. And now, she wondered, what else had she wasted in this life she'd tried so hard to make smaller, safer? But even then, she had no idea how meeting Ethan would unravel the careful lies she'd built around herself, or that his truths could burn just as painfully. Little did she know, the storm wasn't just brewing in her heart. It was circling her from every angle. From William's jealousy and his plans to dig into Ethan's past, to Eleanor's relentless grip on her future, Emily would soon be forced to choose, security or love. And in that choice, a question lingered: what price would she pay to truly be free? The air in the grand dining room was stifling, suffused with a wealth that felt more like a prison than a privilege. Emily sat poised, her exterior as polished as the silverware before her, yet her heart beat with a rhythm that spoke of unease. To her right, Eleanor's presence loomed like a shadow, her voice a constant reminder of expectations Emily never chose for herself. Across the table, William lounged with an air of entitlement, his confidence unshaken, as if the very world bent to his will. In this glittering stage of false smiles and orchestrated charm, Emily felt her spirit shrinking. She longed for a different world, a world not measured by the size of a fortune or the weight of appearances, but by the simple, unadulterated joy of doing something meaningful. Yet Eleanor's voice echoed in her mind, a mantra that had shaped her existence: security above all. What was a dream when measured against the reality of wealth? What was happiness if it couldn't be neatly displayed in a gilded frame? Little did Emily know, the threads of her carefully constructed life were already beginning to fray. This dinner was meant to solidify her future, a future tethered to William's cold pragmatism and Eleanor's unyielding ambitions. Yet beneath her polite nods and feigned smiles, a quiet rebellion simmered. On the streets of New York, where the city breathed in a way the suffocating grandeur of the dining room never could, Emily found solace. The sharp winter air stung her cheeks as she handed out bowls of warm soup to those who had been forgotten by society. Here, among the homeless and the overlooked, she felt alive. There was no judgment, no expectations, only the raw, unfiltered humanity she had craved. Every smile she received, every whispered thank you, was a balm to the wounds of her soul. This was a world where her existence mattered not for the weight of her surname, but for the kindness she extended to others. And yet, even here, the weight of her reality lingered. Eleanor's voice echoed in her mind, a relentless reminder that these acts of compassion were frivolous distractions from the future she had been groomed to secure. But what Eleanor saw as distraction, Emily began to see as purpose. Still, she was torn, bound by the chains of obligation, yet yearning for a life of meaning. Little did she know that this divide within her would soon be brought into stark relief by an encounter she could never have anticipated. It happened on an otherwise unremarkable day. A coffee cup, a careless movement, and a voice that carried more conviction than Emily had heard in years. "You're wasting it," the man had said, not unkindly, but with a firmness that startled her. She looked up into eyes that seemed to see straight through her, through the carefully curated facade, through the walls she had built to protect herself. Ethan. That was his name. An artist whose presence seemed at once unassuming and magnetic. Their exchange was brief, but it lingered with her far longer than she expected. Who was this man to challenge her, to imply that there was something in her life worth salvaging? And why did his words make her feel as though she had been seen for the first time in years? Unbeknownst to her, this meeting was more than a fleeting moment. It was the first ripple in a tide that would upend her life. When their paths crossed again, it was as though fate had intervened. Ethan, with his quiet confidence and unshakable idealism, invited Emily into a world she had only glimpsed, a world where people came together not out of obligation, but out of genuine care for one another. The idea of preparing a Christmas dinner for the homeless at his community center was daunting, yet there was something in his sincerity that made her hesitate before refusing. And so, against her better judgment, or perhaps in line with the truest part of herself, she agreed. It was not just the work they did together that began to bridge the gap between their lives, but the silences between the work. Those silences, filled with unspoken questions and mutual understanding, felt more intimate than any conversation she had ever shared with William. Little did she know, this act of stepping outside her comfort zone would bring with it not only new possibilities but new dangers. The night of the arranged dinner with William was meant to solidify the expectations Eleanor had so painstakingly constructed. But Emily, driven by a need she barely understood herself, slipped away. She found herself at the community center, her hands deep in flour and her laughter blending with Ethan's as they prepared pies for the Christmas feast. For the first time in years, she felt light, untethered by the burdens of her prescribed destiny. It was not without risk, this rebellion. She knew Eleanor would not forgive such a transgression. But in that moment, as Ethan looked at her with an expression that held neither judgment nor expectation, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't dared name. Eleanor's arrival was as inevitable as the storm it heralded. Her fury was palpable, her words cutting. Yet for the first time, Emily did not shrink beneath her mother's wrath. Perhaps it was Ethan's quiet presence beside her, or perhaps it was the growing realization that her life could be her own if only she dared to claim it. But Eleanor was not a woman easily deterred. With William in tow, she made her intentions clear: Emily would comply, or she would lose everything. And yet, even in this moment of confrontation, the bond between Emily and Ethan solidified. He defended her, not as a possession to be claimed, but as a person deserving of respect and agency. As the night ended, Emily was left with a choice. Would she continue to live under the weight of expectations she had never chosen? Or would she dare to step into the unknown, where love, risk, and true freedom awaited? The storm within her grew stronger, but one thing was clear: her life could never return to what it had been. 4 days after that fateful night, Emily found herself drifting in an ocean of uncertainty. Ethan's kiss had been unexpected, yet it lingered on her lips like a forbidden promise. She had tried to push the moment from her mind, to bury it beneath the weight of her obligations and the steady rhythm of a life she no longer recognized. But the harder she tried, the more vividly it surfaced. And then there were the flowers. They arrived each morning, bright against the gray monotony of her days. A simple note accompanied each bouquet, never ostentatious, but filled with words that struck chords she had long since silenced. Ethan's persistence was not the kind that overwhelmed, it was patient, deliberate, and utterly disarming. Emily felt herself standing at a precipice, teetering between the safety of what she had always known and the dizzying possibility of something new. Little did she realize, the seeds of her own desires were beginning to bloom, fragile but undeniable. Memories have a way of creeping in when we least expect them, unearthing truths we've tried to forget. For Emily, the memories came in flashes: a younger version of herself, flour dusting her hands as she shaped pastries with a joy that had once seemed boundless. She could hear her laughter echoing in the small bakery she had dreamed of owning, a sanctuary she had envisioned as a place where she could pour her soul into her craft. But dreams have a way of withering under the weight of expectations. Eleanor's voice had been ever present, a constant reminder that passion was no substitute for security. What good is a bakery when you can have a future? Eleanor had asked. And Emily, so eager to please, had traded her dreams for a life of gilded cages. Now, faced with the echoes of her past, she began to wonder if she could ever reclaim the pieces of herself she had left behind. Ethan, too, was a man haunted by his past. His charm and confidence were not the product of ease, but of survival. He had been shaped by struggle, molded by a world that had shown him both its cruelty and its beauty. There were days when the shadows of his past threatened to consume him, when the scars of old betrayals burned fresh. Yet it was those very scars that gave him his strength. Ethan had learned to turn pain into purpose, to build something meaningful out of the rubble of his past. The community center, with its peeling walls and mismatched chairs, was more than a refuge for the city's forgotten. It was a testament to his resilience, a reminder that even in darkness, light could be found. As he pursued Emily, it wasn't just her beauty that captivated him. but the glimpses of vulnerability and courage she tried so hard to hide. He saw in her the same longing that had once driven him, a hunger for a life of authenticity and connection. But Ethan's pursuit was not without its complications. His past, though hidden, was never truly gone. And as his world began to intertwine with Emily's, he knew it was only a matter of time before those shadows came to light. In a world where power and influence reigned supreme, Eleanor and William were a formidable pair. Their alliance, born of mutual ambition, was as calculating as it was ruthless. Eleanor, ever the strategist, had no intention of letting her daughter slip through her grasp. And William, driven by a possessiveness he masked as affection, was willing to go to any lengths to secure Emily's future as his own. Together, they devised a plan, one that hinged on uncovering the truth about Ethan. William's connections ran deep, and it was not long before a private investigator was enlisted to dig into Ethan's past. The aim was clear: to find the skeletons in his closet and use them to drive a wedge between him and Emily. But even as they schemed, neither Eleanor nor William could have anticipated the depth of Ethan's secrets, or the lengths he would go to protect the life he had built. The holiday season in New York has a way of amplifying emotions, casting both joy and despair in sharper relief. For Emily, the preparations for the Christmas dinner at the community center were a welcome distraction from the turmoil of her personal life. She threw herself into the work with a fervor that surprised even herself, finding solace in the simple act of giving. But the reprieve was short-lived. On the eve of the event, Eleanor arrived unannounced, William in tow. The confrontation was inevitable, the tension in the room palpable. With a measured smile that barely concealed his arrogance, William presented Emily with a ring, a glittering symbol of the life Eleanor had chosen for her. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Emily, caught between the weight of expectation and the pull of her heart, felt the walls closing in around her. Ethan's revelation came like a thunderclap, shattering the fragile equilibrium of the room. In a gesture both grand and unexpected, he revealed himself as the owner not only of the community center but of several other ventures across the city. His success, built on years of struggle and sacrifice, was undeniable. The declaration was not just a defiance of William's assumptions but a testament to his own worth. And yet, even as he professed his love for Emily, the weight of his past hung heavy in the air, an unspoken truth that threatened to unravel everything. As Emily stood at the crossroads of her life, she realized the choice before her was not merely between two men, but between two versions of herself. One rooted in duty and security, the other in passion and authenticity. The storm brewing around her grew fiercer, and with it came a question she could no longer avoid. Could she truly defy the life she had always known for the love she had only just discovered? The days that followed were a paradox of light and shadow. Emily and Ethan, now bound together in a tenuous new reality, began to explore the fragile beginnings of their shared life. Their love was a force that carried them through moments of quiet joy and discovery, yet the unspoken weight of Ethan's past loomed like a specter over their happiness. Emily found herself caught between worlds. On one hand, there was the warmth she felt in Ethan's presence, the sense of purpose she discovered as they worked side by side to breathe life into the community center. On the other, there was the faint but insistent echo of her mother's warnings and William's ominous certainty. And yet, for all the challenges, these days were a revelation. Emily learned to laugh again, to trust her instincts, to believe that she could forge her own path. But in the quiet hours, when the city settled into its uneasy slumber, she couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that this peace was temporary, that the storm they had outrun would soon catch up with them. William's plan unfolded with a precision born of spite. The investigators' findings painted a picture that was damning, if incomplete. Ethan, it seemed, had been accused of a crime years ago, a crime he vehemently denied, though the shadows of suspicion had never fully lifted. The details were murky, the evidence circumstantial, but for someone like William, it was enough. With this revelation in hand, William made his move. He approached Ethan not with anger, but with the cold calculation of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. The terms were simple: walk away from Emily, or the truth of his past would become public knowledge. For Ethan, the choice was excruciating. His love for Emily was undeniable, yet the thought of dragging her into the mire of his old life was almost more than he could bear. This was not just a battle for Emily's future, but for Ethan's very sense of self. He had spent years trying to outrun his past, to rebuild his life on a foundation of honesty and resilience. Now, it seemed that foundation was crumbling beneath his feet. For Emily, the revelation of Ethan's past came like a thunderbolt, shaking the fragile equilibrium of their relationship. She felt betrayed, not by the truth itself, but by the fact that Ethan had kept it from her. What else had he hidden? And yet, even as anger and disappointment surged within her, another emotion took hold: empathy. Emily began to see the parallels between Ethan's journey and her own. They were both products of worlds that sought to define them, to confine them to roles they had never chosen. Her anger softened into understanding, but the path forward was anything but clear. Trust, once broken, is not easily repaired. As she grappled with these revelations, Emily found herself drawn back into the orbit of her mother and William. Their world, with its rigid expectations and superficial comforts, beckoned like a siren's call. But every step closer to that world felt like a step away from herself, from the woman she was slowly becoming. Meanwhile, Eleanor's own story began to unfold in quiet, unexpected ways. The facade of control she had so carefully maintained was beginning to crack. Through a series of flashbacks, her motivations were laid bare: a life shaped by scarcity and fear, by choices made not out of malice but desperation. She had pushed Emily toward William not because she wanted to stifle her daughter's dreams, but because she believed she was protecting her from the pain of failure and uncertainty. Yet, as she watched Emily struggle, Eleanor began to question the cost of her ambitions. Had she sacrificed too much of her daughter's happiness for the sake of security? In her own way, Eleanor embarked on a journey of redemption. It was not a clean or simple process, but one marked by small, tentative steps toward vulnerability and honesty. The confrontation between Emily and William was inevitable, a clash of wills that had been building for months. Armed with the investigators' findings, William sought to dismantle what remained of Emily's faith in Ethan. But Emily, bolstered by her growing sense of self, refused to yield. This was not the timid, uncertain woman William had once known. This was a woman who had faced her own fears, who had learned to trust her instincts, and who was no longer willing to be manipulated. In a moment of clarity, Emily realized that the life William offered was not one of safety, but of suffocation. She would not trade her freedom for the illusion of security, no matter how tempting it might seem. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily delved into the details of Ethan's past. With the help of those who believed in him, she pieced together the evidence that would exonerate him once and for all. It was a process fraught with challenges, but Emily's resolve never wavered. The climax came in a dramatic confrontation that brought all the players to the table. William's scheme was exposed for what it was: a desperate attempt to control a woman who had outgrown him. The truth of Ethan's innocence was revealed, not through grand gestures, but through the quiet persistence of those who had always known his worth. In the aftermath of the storm, Emily and Ethan found their way back to each other. Their love, tested and tempered by adversity, was stronger than ever. Together, they began to build a life not defined by the shadows of their pasts, but by the promise of a brighter future. Eleanor, too, found her own form of redemption. Humbled by her daughter's courage, she began to see the value in letting go of control, in allowing Emily to chart her own course. It was not an easy transformation, but it was a necessary one. As the story drew to a close, the themes of love, resilience, and redemption came full circle. Emily's journey was not one of perfection, but of growth, a testament to the power of choice and the enduring strength of the human spirit.